They begged the galaxy not to provoke humans. The truth came too late. Part 1-1. The great chamber hung in the silent dark above the planet Zelos, a ring of light and glass spinning slowly around a core of ancient stone. Inside, beings from over 200 worlds sat in curved rows, their forms as different as the stars they came from. Some had skin like polished metal. Others pulsed with soft bioluminescence, and a few communicated only through scent and vibration. They were the Galactic Council, the closest thing the known universe had to a governing body, and today they were arguing about Earth. Dale Hicks stood alone at the center podium, a human among aliens. He was tall but not imposing, with tired eyes and a voice that had grown hoarse from repeating the same warning. His gray uniform bore no rank, only a small silver pin shaped like a globe, the symbol of Earth's diplomatic mission. He had been pleading with them for weeks, ever since the first reports came in from the Outer Rim. "You keep calling us primitive," Dale said, his voice steady despite the weight in his chest, "but you haven't seen what we're capable of." "Not really." A ripple of murmurs passed through the chamber. From the Cathari delegation, a broad-shouldered warrior with armored skin leaned forward. Admiral Rourke, commander of the Cathari frontier fleet, let out a low, rumbling laugh that sounded like grinding stone. "Primitive is generous," Rourke said, his translator implant giving his words a flat, mechanical tone. "Your species barely crawled out of your gravity well a century ago. You still burn fuel to leave your own moon. You have no unified government, no ancient lineage, no cosmic wisdom. You are clever, yes, but cleverness does not win wars." Dale didn't flinch. He tapped a control on his wristband, and a hologram flickered to life above the podium. It showed a grainy sensor log from a Xeran patrol vessel near the Helios border. In the footage, 3 human freighters drifted peacefully through an asteroid field. Then, without warning, a Cathari raider emerged from behind a rock, weapons charged, demanding tribute. What happened next lasted less than 8 seconds. The freighters didn't return fire. They didn't flee. Instead, their hulls shimmered and the space around the Cathari ship twisted like wet paper. The raider vanished, not in an explosion, but as if it had never existed. No debris, no energy signature, just empty space. "That was 3 months ago," Dale said quietly. "The Cathari never reported it. They erased the log. But the Xerans kept a copy, and they're scared." Rourke's eyes narrowed. "Trickery, illusion, your kind loves drama." "It wasn't drama," Dale replied. "It was restraint. Those freighters were civilian. They had no weapons. What you saw was defensive tech, something we developed after we stopped fighting each other. We don't want war. But if someone starts one, we end it. Fast, clean, final." From the Vorn Elder's alcove, a soft chime sounded. Elder Voss, her translucent skin glowing faintly blue, raised a slender hand. "Counselor Hicks," she said, her voice like wind through crystal. "If your people are so powerful, why hide? Why wait? Why not join us openly? Share your knowledge. Build trust." Dale looked at her, and for the first time his voice softened. "Because we learned the hard way that trust gets people killed. Earth spent centuries tearing itself apart, over land, over faith, over power. We built bombs that could crack continents. We poisoned our own oceans. We almost wiped ourselves out 3 times. When we finally united, it wasn't because we became saints. It was because we realized the only enemy left was ourselves." He paused, letting the silence settle. "So we made a promise. Never again. Not to each other and not to anyone else. We built systems, quiet ones, that watch, listen, and protect. We don't broadcast our strength because we don't want to be tested. But if you test us, you won't get a second chance." The chamber was still now. Even the ever-present hum of life support seemed to quiet. Then Rourke stood. "Enough fear talk," he boomed. "You expect us to cower before a species that still uses chemical rockets? That argues over which color flag to fly? I say we send a proper delegation to Sol, not to threaten, but to observe. If they are as dangerous as you claim, they will prove it. If not, they will learn their place." Dale's stomach dropped. "Admiral, don't. A delegation with armed ships will be seen as an act of war." "Then let them declare war," Rourke said with a smirk. "I would welcome the chance to see these quiet systems in action." The vote was called. Dale watched helpless as hand after hand rose in favor of the Cathari proposal. Even some of the more cautious species agreed. Humanity needed to be assessed, not feared. Only Elder Voss abstained, her eyes full of sorrow as she looked at Dale. After the session, Dale walked alone through the observation deck, staring out at the swirl of Zelos below. The planet's twin moons cast silver streaks across its cloud cover. He activated his private comms channel. "Lunar Command, this is Hicks," he said, voice low. "They're coming. 12 ships, Cathari design. They'll enter the Sol system in 10 days. Tell her to prepare silence." On the other end, a woman's voice responded, calm and sharp. "Understood. We won't fire a shot unless they do. But if they cross the line..." "They won't get to cross it twice," Dale finished. He ended the call and pressed his forehead against the cool glass. Far away past the rings of Saturn and the silent watchtowers of Jupiter, human ships were already moving, not with fanfare, not with threats, but with the quiet certainty of a storm that knows exactly when to break. The galaxy had been warned, and humanity never repeated itself. They begged the galaxy not to provoke humans. The truth came too late. Part 2. 10 days passed like breath held too long. On Mars orbit, Captain Luke Ellis stood on the command deck of the Perseverance, hands clasped behind his back, eyes fixed on the star map glowing in the center of the room. The ship was quiet, the crew moving with practiced calm. No alarms, no chatter, just the soft hum of life support and the occasional beep of a status panel. They were waiting. Down on Earth, cities went about their lives. Children went to school. Farmers harvested crops under domes. Engineers repaired solar arrays on the moon. No one panicked. No one even knew the Cathari fleet was coming. That was by design. Humanity had learned long ago that fear spread faster than fire, and fire had burned them enough. But up here, in the cold dark between planets, the silence was different. It was the silence of a trap already set. Admiral Rourke's fleet dropped out of warp just beyond Neptune's orbit. 12 ships, each shaped like a jagged claw, their hulls shimmering with active camouflage. They moved slowly, confidently, broadcasting a standard first contact hail on all open frequencies. "This is Admiral Rourke of the Cathari Sovereign Fleet," the message began, translated into basic galactic standard. "We come in peace to establish dialogue with the human homeworld. We request safe passage through your system and docking rights at your nearest orbital station." The message repeated every 30 seconds. No reply came. Rourke frowned from his command throne. Are they deaf? Or just rude? His second-in-command, a lean officer named Vec, checked the sensors. No activity from Earth. No military movements. Mars orbit shows a few civilian ships, but nothing armed. They're ignoring us. "Then we remind them we exist," Rourke said. He ordered 2 of his fastest scouts to move ahead toward the asteroid belt. "Scan everything. Look for hidden bases, weapons platforms, anything." The scouts obeyed, engines flaring as they shot forward. But before they reached the belt, something changed. Their comms cut out. Their navigation systems flickered, then went dark. Not damaged, just empty, like the data had been gently erased. "What is this?" Vec asked, voice tight. Rourke scowled. "Interference. Solar flare, maybe." But there was no solar flare, and the scouts never came back. Still, Rourke pressed on. Pride was a heavy cloak, and he wore it well. By the time his main fleet crossed the orbit of Jupiter, he was broadcasting a new message. Louder, sharper. "Earth. Respond or be considered hostile. We will not be ignored by primitives." This time a reply came not through comms, not with words. It came as a shift in the space around them. One moment, the Cathari fleet floated in the familiar star field of the Sol system. The next, the stars themselves seemed to blur. The ship's sensors screamed warnings, gravitational anomalies, quantum fluctuations, spatial compression. But the readings made no sense. The laws of physics bent like wet rope. Rourke shouted orders, but his voice was swallowed by the distortion. His ship's engines failed. Weapons locked. Life support stuttered. Outside the viewports, the other 11 vessels twisted, stretched, then vanished, not in fire, but in silence. He saw it happen to his own ship. The hull didn't crack. The crew didn't scream. They simply stopped existing in the way they had before. Time folded, space folded, and the Cathari fleet was removed from reality like a bad line in a poem. On the Perseverance, Luke Ellis watched the entire event on his main screen. No explosions. No debris field. Just 12 empty coordinates where 12 warships had been. "Confirm total neutralization," he said. "Confirmed," replied his tactical officer, a young woman named Nina Cole. "All Cathari signatures gone. No escape pods. No distress signals. They're just Gone. Good, Luke said. Clean and quiet, just like Donovan wanted. Back on Earth, General Maeve Donovan stood in the underground command center beneath the Rocky Mountains of Colorado. She had not slept in 36 hours. She didn't need to. She had seen this moment coming since the council vote. Now she typed a single line into the secure network. Operation Silence complete. No human casualties. No shots fired. Then she leaned back and closed her eyes. Meanwhile, on Exelos, the Galactic Council received the last transmission from Admiral Rourke. It was only 3 seconds long. In it, the proud Cathari warrior stared into the camera, his face pale beneath his armored skin. They didn't fire weapons, he whispered, voice breaking. They folded space-time around us, the feed cut to static. Panic erupted in the chamber. The Zirin Hive delegates pulsed red with alarm. The Vorn elders sat in stunned silence. Even the usually unshakable Trade Consortium reps began whispering about human anomalies and reality weapons. Dale Hicks was summoned again. He walked into the chamber not as a petitioner, but as the only human who could explain what had just happened. You sent warships into our home system, he said, voice flat. You called us primitives. You ignored our warnings. And now you're surprised that we defended ourselves. Defended? Shouted a Cathari counselor, his voice raw with grief. You erased them. Without warning, without mercy. Mercy is what kept us from doing worse, Dale replied. We could have tracked your homeworld. We could have shut down your entire grid, but we didn't. We only removed the threat. That's not cruelty. That's control. Elder Voss spoke then, her voice calm but heavy. Counselor Hicks, what are you? Dale looked at her, and for the first time, he let the mask slip. We're the species that survived our own extinction 3 times. We're the ones who looked into the abyss and decided to build a wall around it. We don't want your fear. We don't want your war, but if you bring either to our door, we will end it before it begins. The council fell silent, but silence doesn't last long in politics. Within hours, a new motion was drafted, not by the Cathari, but by the Zirin Hive and the Trade Consortium. They called for a full blockade of the Sol system. No ships in, no signals out. Human assets beyond the Oort cloud would be seized. Earth would be isolated until it submitted to galactic oversight. Dale tried to argue. He showed them more logs, footage of human cities rebuilding after climate wars, of scientists sharing cures for free, of children playing in parks under artificial suns. We're not monsters, he said. We're just tired. But the council had tasted fear, and fear breeds control. The vote passed with overwhelming support. As Dale left the chamber, he looked up at the stars through the transparent dome. Somewhere out there, Luke Ellis and Maeve Donovan were preparing for what came next, and he knew, with cold certainty, that the galaxy had just made its final mistake. They had thought humans were weak because they were quiet. They would soon learn that silence was the loudest warning of all. They begged the galaxy not to provoke humans. The truth came too late. Part 3. The blockade began at the edge of the Oort cloud, where the sun's light grew thin and the void stretched into forever. Over 200 alien vessels formed a ring around the Sol system. Cathari warships, Zirin drone carriers, Vorn observation spheres, and dozens of others from species who had never even spoken to a human. They cut all trade routes, jammed all long-range signals, declared any ship leaving Earth's gravity well a threat to galactic security. For 3 weeks, nothing happened. No human ships tried to break through. No angry messages came from Earth. No weapons fired. The Sol system went dark, like a house with its lights turned off and its doors locked. The council watched, waited, and slowly began to believe they had won. They're cowering, said a Zirin delegate during a private briefing. They have no answer to unity. Even Elder Voss allowed herself a sliver of hope. Perhaps isolation would bring humility. Perhaps humans would finally see reason. But on Mars, in a hidden hangar beneath the red dust, Luke Ellis stood beside a machine no alien had ever seen. It was not a weapon. Not in the traditional sense. It looked like a simple satellite dish mounted on a rover, its surface dull gray and unmarked. But inside it held a quantum resonator tuned to the very fabric of information itself. Project Aegis is ready, said Dr. Nina Cole, now in a field engineer's suit, her hands steady on the control panel. Once we activate it, every non-human system within 50 light-years will experience a cascade failure. Not because we attack them, but because their code won't understand reality anymore. Luke nodded. They wanted a blockade. We'll give them silence. Back on Earth, General Maeve Donovan gave the final order from her command bunker. No fanfare, no speech. Just 3 words over a secure line. Initiate the reset. And then across the galaxy, everything changed. It started with a flicker. On the bridge of a Cathari destroyer, a navigation screen blinked once, then displayed a string of symbols no one recognized. On a Xeran hive ship, the swarm mind suddenly lost connection with half its drones. On a Vorn science vessel, the AI that had guided them for centuries rebooted and spoke in a human child's voice, reciting a nursery rhyme. Within minutes, every alien ship near Sol lost control. Not violently, not chaotically, just gently. Engines powered down. Weapons safed themselves. Comms switched to a looping audio file. The sound of rain on a rooftop and a woman humming. No explosions. No deaths. Just stillness. From the Perseverance, Luke Ellis watched the blockade dissolve like sugar in water. Alien crews stumbled through their ships confused, trying to reboot systems that refused to obey. Some panicked. Others sat in silence, staring at screens that now showed old Earth broadcasts. News reports from the 21st century. School lessons, home videos of birthdays and weddings. They're seeing us, Nina said softly. Not as soldiers. As people. Luke gave the next order. Broadcast the archive. And so they did. Every disabled ship received the same transmission. Not a threat. Not a demand. Just footage. Grainy, raw, heartbreaking footage. Cities burning during the Atlantic data wars. Refugee camps on the moon after the orbital treaty collapsed. A young boy in New Delhi sharing his last bottle of clean water with a stranger. Generals weeping as they signed peace accords over tables made of rubble. The message wasn't spoken. It didn't need to be. You think we are weak because we do not conquer, but we are strong because we chose not to. On Zelos, the council chamber erupted. Some delegates demanded immediate retaliation. Others fell to their knees, overwhelmed by what they had seen. Elder Voss played the footage again and again, tears tracing paths down her translucent cheeks. They lived through hell, she whispered, and instead of spreading it, they buried it. Dale Hicks stood in the back of the room, arms crossed, watching the chaos. He felt no triumph, only sorrow. We didn't want you to see this, he said to no one in particular. We kept it hidden because we hoped you'd never force our hand. Meanwhile, Luke's fleet moved through the paralyzed armada, not as conquerors but as caretakers. Human engineers boarded disabled ships not to seize them, but to restore basic functions: life support, oxygen, heat. They left food packs, medical supplies, and a single note in every language the council used. Go home. Tell them what you saw. One Cathari officer, a young pilot named Toran, met Luke face to face on the deck of his own ship. Toran's hands shook as he held up a datapad showing a video of a human mother singing to her baby in a fallout shelter. Why show us this? Toran asked, voice breaking. Why not just destroy us? Because destruction is easy, Luke replied. Understanding is hard, and we're tired of being misunderstood. Toran nodded slowly. My people thought you were animals, but you remember your pain so others won't have to feel it. Back on Earth, the sun rose over the Pacific coast. Fishermen hauled in nets under a clear sky. Students walked to school with books in their arms. No one knew about the silent war that had just ended beyond the stars, and that was how humanity wanted it. But in the command bunker, Maeve Donovan stared at a live feed from Zelos. The council was in emergency session. Voices rose and fell. Accusations flew. Some called for peace. Others whispered of ancient prophecies, of a quiet species that would one day teach the galaxy the cost of pride. She turned off the screen. They had shown the truth. Now it was up to the galaxy to listen. They begged the galaxy not to provoke humans. The truth came too late. Part 4. The council chamber on Zelos felt heavier now, as if the air itself had absorbed the weight of what it had witnessed. Dale Hicks stood once more at the center podium, not summoned this time, but invited. The same beings who had laughed at his warnings now watched him with wide eyes and hushed breaths. Even the Cathari delegation, reduced to a single junior officer after the loss of their fleet, sat in stunned silence. Dale didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. You wanted to know what we are, he said. So I'll tell you the rest. He activated a new file. Not video this time, but a data stream labeled Project Aegis, Origin Logs. The chamber's main display filled with schematics, timelines, and voice recordings from Earth's past. It showed how, after the third near-extinction event, the Great Data War of 2147, humanity's surviving governments had done something no one expected. They didn't build bigger bombs. They built a shield made of knowledge. We realized that war wasn't won by who hit hardest, Dale explained. It was won by who understood the enemy best. So we stopped fighting each other. We pooled every scientist, every engineer, every historian, and we asked one question: how do we make sure no one ever dares to start a war with us again? The answer was Aegis, not a weapon but a system, a network of dormant nodes hidden in every human-made object that left Earth: satellites, probes, cargo drones, even old space junk. Each node contained adaptive quantum logic, capable of analyzing any foreign technology and rewriting its core functions to render it harmless. It didn't destroy, it neutralized. It made aggression impossible by making the tools of war forget how to work. We never activated it fully. Dale continued. Not until you sent your fleet. Not until you blockaded our home. We hoped we'd never have to. From the Vorn alcove, Elder Voss spoke, her voice softer than before. You could have told us. Would you have believed us? Dale asked. Or would you have called it bluff? You saw our cities, our schools, our art, and assumed we were soft. But softness isn't weakness. It's choice. We chose peace so deeply that we built a universe where war against us simply stops. A murmur spread through the chamber. A Ziran delegate rose, their bioluminescent skin pulsing gently. Then why show us now? Why reveal your secret? Because secrets only work if no one pushes, Dale said. You pushed. And now you know. We don't want your fear. We don't want your worship. We just want to be left alone. But if you ever come at us again, you won't just lose your ships, you'll lose your understanding of how they work. And that's a loss no species recovers from. Then, from the back of the room, a voice cut through the tension. It was Torin, the young Cathari pilot who had met Luke Ellis aboard his disabled ship. He stepped forward, still in his patched uniform, holding a small data chip. I was on the Perseverance, he said, his translator implant giving his words a quiet tone. The humans didn't treat us like prisoners. They gave us water, food. They showed us videos of their children playing in parks. One of their engineers fixed my ship's oxygen recycler with parts from her own toolkit. He held up the chip. This is a copy of their archive. Not just the wars. The music. The poetry. The way they plant trees in cities just to give birds a home. I watched it all. And I realized we were wrong. We thought strength meant claws and fire, but their strength is in what they protect, not what they take. He turned to the Cathari officer beside him. Admiral Rourke called them clever apes. But apes don't build systems that unmake war without bloodshed. Only a species that has drowned in its own violence and climbed out could do that. The chamber fell silent again, but this time it was different. Not the silence of fear, but of reflection. Dale looked at Torin and nodded slightly. Then he turned back to the council. There's one more thing you should know. Project Aegis isn't controlled by any government. It's autonomous. It learns, it adapts, and it's still active. A ripple of unease passed through the room. You mean, it's watching us now? Asked a trade consortium rep. Not watching, Dale corrected. Listening. If any ship with hostile intent enters human space again, Aegis will respond. Not because we order it. Because it was built to protect life, not power. Elder Voss rose slowly. Then humanity is not a threat. You are a boundary. A line the galaxy must not cross. Exactly, Dale said. After the session, Dale walked with Torin through the garden spire of Zelos, where alien flora bloomed under twin suns. What will your people do now? Dale asked. Torin looked at the horizon. Some will call for revenge. But more will ask questions. And questions lead to understanding, maybe. Maybe we'll send students instead of soldiers next time. Dale smiled faintly. We'd welcome that. Back in Sol space, Luke Ellis stood on the observation deck of the Perseverance as the last alien ship limped away toward the stars. Nina Cole joined him, holding 2 mugs of coffee. Do you think they'll leave us alone now? She asked. For a while, Luke said. Fear fades. Curiosity grows. And one day someone else will get greedy. But next time they'll remember what happened. He sipped his coffee, watching Earth rise over the moon's edge. a blue jewel wrapped in clouds and quiet. On the surface, in a small town in Montana, an old man taught his grandson how to fix a solar panel. In Tokyo Dome, a girl practiced violin under artificial sunlight. In the Atlantic arcology, scientists shared a breakthrough in ocean cleanup with no patents, no profit, just progress. Humanity didn't celebrate its victory. It never had. Because for them, survival wasn't a triumph. It was a promise kept. And somewhere in the deep dark, a single Aegis node hummed softly, waiting. Not for war, but for peace to hold. They begged the galaxy not to provoke humans. The truth came too late. Part 5. Years passed. Not many, but enough for wounds to scar and memories to settle. The Galactic Council still met above Zelos, but the air in the chamber had changed. No one spoke of Earth with mockery now. When new species joined the council and asked about the humans, they were met with quiet looks and careful words. Some elders would simply say, "They are not to be tested." Others would show the archive, the footage of ruined cities, shared bread, and children laughing in the rain, and let it speak for itself. Dale Hicks stayed on Zelos. He never returned to Earth, not because he couldn't, but because someone had to stand between two worlds that still didn't fully understand each other. He lived in a small apartment near the Garden Spire, where he grew real Earth tomatoes in a hydroponic box and listened to old jazz records on a player he'd brought from home. Sometimes alien scholars would visit, asking gentle questions about human history, art, or why they planted trees in metal cities. Dale always answered, never with pride, never with shame, just truth. On Earth, life went on as it always had, quiet, stubborn, and full of small kindnesses. The great defense networks remained, but they slept. General Maeve Donovan retired to a cabin in the Pacific Northwest, where she fished in the mornings and taught local kids how to navigate by the stars. She never spoke of the blockade or the reset. When asked what she did during the crisis, she'd just smile and say, "I kept the lights on." Captain Luke Ellis left the fleet after the silence operation. He moved to a town in Montana, where the sky was wide and the nights were dark enough to see the Milky Way without filters. He taught physics at the local high school, using old ship schematics to explain gravity and light. His students didn't know he'd once commanded a vessel that could unmake warships with a thought. They just knew Mr. Ellis made science feel like magic. Nina Cole stayed with the space program, but not in combat. She led a team that built deep space observatories designed to listen, not to fight. Their mission was simple: watch the stars, learn their stories, and never forget how close humanity had come to losing its own. Trade with the galaxy resumed, but slowly. No alien ships entered the Sol system without permission. No demands were made. Instead, cautious exchanges began. Earth sent seeds that could grow in toxic soil, medical data on healing radiation burns, and recordings of whale songs. In return, they received mineral samples, star maps of distant nebulae, and once, a single crystal from the Vorn that hummed a lullaby when held in the dark. The galaxy learned to listen. New treaties were signed, not of dominance, but of distance. A line was drawn around human space, unofficial, unmarked, but understood. Cross it with weapons, and reality itself would turn against you. Cross it with open hands, and you might be offered tea. Some species still whispered that humanity was dangerous, that their silence was a mask for something colder, but those voices grew quieter with time. Because every year, more alien students came to Earth's orbital universities. Every year, more human doctors traveled to refugee worlds to help rebuild. Every year, the myth of the warlike ape faded, replaced by something stranger and more humbling, a species that had stared into its own darkness and chosen to build light instead. On Zelos, Elder Voss often visited Dale in his garden. They would sit on a stone bench watching the twin moons rise and speak of small things: weather, books, the way Earth's rain smelled different from Zelos's mist. "Do you ever miss it?" she asked him one evening. "Every day," Dale said. "But someone has to stay. Someone has to remind them that we're not monsters, just people who learned the hard way." She nodded. "Your kind frightens us less now. Not because you've changed, but because we finally see you." Back in Sol space, far beyond the orbit of Pluto, a single human probe drifted. It was old, launched before the data wars, covered in dust and cosmic rays. Embedded in its core was a dormant Aegis node, tiny, silent, and still active. It did not think. It did not judge. It simply waited, watching the dark for any sign of threat. It had not been needed in years, but it remained, because peace was not the absence of danger, it was the presence of memory. In classrooms across Earth, children learned about the Great Silence, not as a victory, but as a lesson. We do not fight because we can, their teachers said. We do not fight because we remember what happens when we do. And out in the galaxy, when young pilots from 100 worlds trained for deep space missions, their instructors would tell them one rule above all others. If your path ever leads you near Sol, slow down. Be respectful. And never ever provoke the humans, for they had begged the galaxy not to. And by the time the truth was understood, it was already too late to undo what had been done.